Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live stream for this afternoon. Uh, Sunny and warm here in LA, about 70 degrees, which is what it is most of the year, right? But better weather than we had last time. So I hope that you're having a good day or a good evening wherever you are. Today, we are going to do some beginner accessibility testing. We're going to be using what are called the WCAG Easy Checks. And we can take a look at those right over here. Um, so this is from the W3C, and it is some nice beginner accessibility testing. If you've never done any kind of accessibility testing before, this is a really great place to get started and do your first round of accessibility testing. It is not comprehensive, right? We're not going to cover every possible accessibility issue on the site. We're not going to find it by doing these checks, but we are going to find some of the most common accessibility barriers that we find on websites. And we're going to learn a little bit about how to go through a website and how to find issues, how to document those issues, and things like that. So let's talk about what we need to get started. I'm going to be using the Firefox browser to get started, and we don't need any kind of special tools. We don't need a screen reader. We don't need any special, downloadable software or anything like that. We just need a couple of browser add-ons. So the first one that we have is called Web Developer browser add-on that is available for all browsers as far as I know. And it adds a bunch of web development tools to the toolbar. It is not specifically an accessibility related browser add-on, but it is still really helpful for doing some basic accessibility testing. It has some nice features that we can use for that. The other browser add-on that I'm using is a color picker. And that's going to basically just make it really easy for us to select colors off of the website so that we can make sure that they have enough color contrast. The other tool that we'll use is just a color contrast checker. And there are just dozens of them online. I tend to use this one from WebAIM. It's pretty basic and it's not the most beautifully designed, but it works really, really well. And I tend to use that a lot, actually. So that would be the only other real tool that we'll be using today. So I was hoping that somebody would volunteer a website to be tested today, but that unfortunately didn't happen. So if you are interested in having one page of your website tested during one of these live streams, definitely get in touch with me and I'll do that. I feel like maybe sometimes people feel a little bit afraid for everyone to see. Oh no, everyone's going to see that I have accessibility issues on my website. And I don't think you need to worry about that. Literally every website has accessibility issues, even the ones that have tried pretty hard to remove any kind of barriers, they're still going to have accessibility issues on them. So don't feel embarrassed or anything about your website if you happen to find some accessibility issues on it. That is literally every website on the internet. So we're going to test today with this one. And I'm interested to see how this goes because I actually generated this website with AI. And I think it'll be interesting to kind of get a feel for how well did it do at implementing some things like semantic HTML? How well did it do at giving heading structure? Did it create the named regions of the pages, the ARIA landmarks? Did it do that? And overall, just kind of how did it do at generating this site? I don't have a lot of hope that it's super accessible. For one thing, I could tell already there's animations here that are happening. You can see on the screen that cannot be stopped. And so that's definitely something that we're going to have to take a look at. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So it should be an interesting journey today. All right, back to the WCAG Easy Checks. So this is the list of the checks that we're doing. So it's not a long list. And I have found, when I'm doing a stream, I'm talking a lot, I'm explaining a lot of things. And so I'm not doing it not doing accessibility testing as quickly or as efficiently as I might do it if I wasn't chit-chatting and explaining things along the way. And it takes about an hour. So that'll be the stream today, be about an hour, and we'll work through this list. And I expect that it'll probably take us about the full hour to get through the list. So we're going to check the page title. We're going to check image text alternatives, headings, contrast ratios. We're going to check to make sure that we can resize without causing layout issues. We're going to make sure that keyboard access and visual focus work. We're going to check any forms, labels, and errors and make sure that those work. We're going to check for moving, flashing, or blinking content. And we've already seen there's definitely a failure for that already. And I forgot to turn off my time logger again. All right, let's get that. Okay. I have to add that to my checklist for prepping. All right, so forms, labels, and errors. Okay, moving, flashing, or blinking content. Check any multimedia. I don't believe it dropped any multimedia onto the page. I think there's just some images. And then an overall basic structure check. All right, so let's get started at the top here by checking out the page title. And how we can check the page title in most browsers is to just hover over the tab at the top of the browser window. And of course, if you're using a screen reader, it would read out the page title to you as well. And we just want to make sure that this page title explains to us what the purpose of this page is. And it is Discover Mercury, Journey to the Innermost Planet, which is what the site is about. So if you've watched any of the previous streams, you know that I've been using another site called Discover Venus that I actually spent hours and hours kind of hand building that out, that Discover Venus site. And I just got a little bit tired of looking at it. So I wanted a new site to take a look at. So if you are interested in testing this site, it is online. It is live at discovermercury.site. So if you want to go take a look and follow along with me as I test this site today, by all means, head over to discovermercury.site. So page title passed. That's a check. It all looks good. So we can go on to the next test. So I do want to explain that these WCAG Easy Checks, they give you a little explanation of what the test is, and they tell you what to do, and they tell you what to look for. And they'll give you some specific instructions for different browsers, and there's even some extra tips on, how it should maybe be formatted and what it should look like. So each test kind of gives you a little bit of introduction on how to go through and do it. So if you want to follow along, join in. All right, image text alternatives. Okay, so it's going to tell us a little bit about how, if we have anybody who cannot see the pictures or cannot process visual information, then we want to have a text alternative available so that everybody can understand what the images are all about. And first, we want to make sure that every image has alt with appropriate alternative text. Of course, the exception for that is decorative images. Decorative images should have an alt attribute, but the value inside the quotes should be empty, should just be nothing inside of it. But the alt should still be there on a decorative image. They've got some tips here on appropriate alt text and what to look for. And they're walking us through kind of how to do this. So for this, we are going to use this web developer extension. And if we go to the images tab, we can display all attributes. Okay. Oh no, so it went behind my image. So that didn't work out so well. Let's see if that's the case for the other images on the page. And then I think this was a font awesome font icon, which has nothing, right? That's just hidden. Okay, so here we have alt text on our images. So full disclosure, none of these three images are actually Mercury. Sorry to disappoint you. The middle one is actually a soap bubble. And this one actually is a photo, but it's not of Mercury. And this one is actually the moon, not Mercury, but that's okay. We're just pretending since obviously we can't go visit Mercury anyway. Okay, so we have for alt text, it looks like when AI generated this page, it just used the name of this particular travel package as the alt text for the image. And that's not very good. It doesn't actually tell me what this image is or why it's here. And it doesn't share any kind of information about, what's going on here. So we would definitely want to flag this as something that would need to be fixed. We would like to see more of a description. Like if we decide that these are decorative images, which in our pretend images, right, aren't even Mercury, so they're probably decorative. But if we were going to pretend and say that these were all actually images of Mercury, we would want to have some kind of description of what these images looked like, so that if somebody cannot see the images, they can still get a feel for what are we trying to convey, what are we trying to share, what information are these images sharing for the people who can see them. And we would want to make sure that we're grabbing that in the alternative text. So I would say all three of these need to be touched up. Okay, let's keep going down the page. I'm going to just ignore that it flagged all of the font awesome icons. those are all hidden from screen readers and assistive technology anyway. And we'll decide later if that's a separate issue that maybe we need to take a look at. Okay, so for foreground images, it doesn't look like there's any other foreground images on the page. We do, of course, have this background image, which I think this background image, if I remember correctly, when I was doing the credits, this is actually Mars. So AI definitely did not do a good job, and it's the same background image here, did not do a good job of actually getting pictures of Mercury. This one actually is Mercury. This is from NASA. And we can't see the alt text there. So let's figure out what we could do. So I know we can use Andy. And if I switch Andy to images, which is a, last time I did a live stream 2 weeks ago, I talked about bookmarklets, and Andy is a bookmarklet. And if we do the Andy, we should be able to, well, that says Andy output is nothing on that image. That's funny. Oh, here we go. Mercury surface. That's pretty mediocre. I would expect it to be a little bit more descriptive of kind of what we were seeing in this image, so that if you couldn't see the image, you would get an idea at least of what Mercury might look like. Because I don't think most people have any idea what Mercury looks like. So I would expect that to be a little bit more descriptive of what this image actually looks like and the kinds of things that we're seeing here. So I don't think that one is doing a particularly good job either. Okay, so we'll go ahead and close out of that. I don't think we should need to use Andy for the rest of today, and we only needed to use it because of the funny way that this alt text is hidden behind the image. I've never actually seen that happen before with this web developer add-on. But anyway, we can also do a check in this add-on. We could find broken images. We can outline the images. We can outline background images. And we could also outline images that don't have alt attributes, which can be handy for finding the ones that might be kind of broken. And I don't see anything getting outlined on the page. So I think we just have those 4 images beside the all of the little font awesome icons. And you can also outline images with empty alt attributes. And why you would want to do that is because when an image has an empty alt attribute, it means that you are communicating that that is a decorative image, right? It's just some kind of like little curly cue or little flourish or little divider line or something that is not conveying any kind of information. It's only on the page to be part of the design, right? So, and in that case, you would want the alt attribute to be just empty. And I don't think that we have anything on the page that's going to meet that criteria. So I'll just double check, make sure nothing is outlined and nothing is. Okay. All right, let's go back over to our checklist. And the next thing it's going to have us check is the headings. And here's what we're going to check for, that the page has a heading. There should be at least one heading, and ideally it should be an H1 near the top of the page on every single page. And then we're going to make sure that if there are sections of the page, that each of those start off with an H2. If there's subsections, each of those would start with an H3, and etc. It goes all the way down to H6. It is pretty rare to use anything much beyond an H4. So H5 and H6 don't get used all that often. Okay, so here's an example of kind of what we're looking for, that we'd have a big H1 at the top of the page describing what the page is about. Each section of the page would start off with an H2, right? So an introduction, using these easy checks, the page title, and then subsections inside of those sections would each start with an H3, and we would keep going on down the page that way. So then it's going to tell us how to check those. So it'll explain to you, right? Like you're going to open up that web dev extension, and you are going to go to information and then view document outline. So this one is actually kind of one of my favorite tests to do. I'm just going to refresh the page because I feel like this has gotten a little, I think we got it a little discombobulated by turning on some things. All right, so let's go over here, information, and then view document outline. And it's going to open a new tab that's going to show us that heading structure for the page, and we can look it over. And I have to say, at first glance, it looks like AI maybe did a little bit better than I expected it to when it generated this page. All right, so we do have an H1 at the top called Discover Mercury. Then we have a section called Mercury Travel Packages. And we've got 3 subsections in there for the 3 different packages, which is pretty accurate. That's what we see on the site. We have a section called the Mercury Experience. And we've got some subsections under there about stellar observations, low gravity activities, things like that. It did flag here, we have a missing heading. So we've got a section for testimonials. And it looks like the testimonials got H4s on them, but there's no H3 inside that section. So the testimonials should have the H3s on them and not H4s. Okay, then we have a section for frequently asked questions, a section for, are you ready for the journey of a lifetime? Because it sure would be if you were going to Planet Mercury. All right, and then a contact us section. And again, there is a missing H3. And we have headquarters, contact, and email. Those should be H3 headings rather than H4. And then we have a Discover Mercury, which is an H3, which that actually seems like a mistake also, because I don't think that this is meant to be a subsection of Contact Us. I think this is meant to be a separate section. So this should probably actually be an H2, and then each of these should be an H3, which would then make this one an H4. And we'll get to that one in a minute because I'm very suspicious that that is an H5. I'm very suspicious that that text is an H5. So we have some failures on the headings. We have some missing heading levels. So there definitely has to be some touch up done in this document to kind of clean those up and make sure that we don't skip heading levels and that all of the headings are using the right level. So I suspect that's our H1 for the page. And then I think our next stage 2 is the Mercury travel packages, which is the next section of the site. And then each one of the packages was an H3. So that's all correct. And then we have the Mercury experience. And then each of these had an H3 on it, which is fair. We have the traveler testimonials, and they're using the name of the person who gave the testimonial as the heading, which is fine, but they skipped a heading level, right? Because that's an H2, and now this is an H4. So those just need to be cleaned up. They can look exactly the same because we can style them with CSS to look any way that we want, but we want to make sure that those get used in order. Then we have our frequently asked questions. Let's go take a look at how that looks. Okay, so there's no headings in the frequently asked questions section, which is interesting. So we'll look at how this accordion got marked up because I think I would probably expect the questions to be headings. I would probably expect that these questions were H3s inside this section, but we'll take a look and see how it got marked up and see if there's maybe another way that those got marked up that might make sense. And then we have the ready for a journey of a lifetime as a heading, and there's no additional subsections inside there, which is fine. It's a very small section. And then we have contact us, right, which is an H2, and then it skips straight to an H4. So this should be H3, H3, H3. Then we have our contact form with no headings, which is fine. And then we have something called Discover Mercury. Okay, so yeah, so this is kind of what I suspected, is that this is not a subsection inside the contact us section. This is actually the footer of the site. And it would be fine for that to start with an H2. It should probably be a little bit more descriptive of what's in the footer if it's going to be a heading. Starting off if we start off the footer with a heading, the text that's in that heading should probably be a description of what kind of content are we expecting to find in the footer and not just repeating the H1 on the page. So that's something that we might want to think about fixing. And then, of course, so that should be an H2, which would then bump everything up below it. So there we would have, if this is an H2, this would be an H3, this would be an H3, this would be an H3, and we could talk about this one and whether or not that should be a heading at all, or if it should be maybe something associated with the form field. Okay, so we checked out our headings. We found some issues that definitely need to be addressed on this site. Not a terrible big surprise. All right, and next is the contrast ratio. And we do want to make sure that that there is sufficient contrast ratio between any text and the background behind it. So you can see, like, here we have gray on a light background, and it's not quite as easy to read as darker text on that light background. So we have a few different ways. We can use an eyedropper. We can use grayscale. I've never actually used that method. That's really interesting. And then you can also use a tool that's going to pull out all the colors used on the page and create kind of like a table of like, oh, if you use this color on this color, does it pass? All right, so it's going to tell us kind of how to check. So here it has us using Juicy Studio Luminosity Analyzer. I've never heard of that tool. This document is a little bit old, but the updated version of it isn't quite ready. It's still in draft mode. We can also try an eyedropper, which I think is what we're going to try, and we'll go over to the page and give that a try now. All right, so the first thing that we would want to check, I think this looks pretty good. The places where we have this really light text on a dark background, that is, I don't even have a question about it. So this purple color or lavender color gets used here on a dark background, and it gets used here with white text, and it appears to be the same color or a very similar color. And There are colors that work with both black and white and have sufficient contrast. So that definitely happens, but I think we'd want to double check and make sure that this color actually does have enough contrast with both the dark background and white text. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here a little bit just to make selecting these colors easier. And let me go ahead and pick this purple color, and it gives me highlights it automatically for me so I can paste it immediately over here. So that's my foreground color. And then let me go ahead and select the background color. So I'm just clicking to do that. Okay, so it is a 7.7 contrast, so that even passes AAA contrast ratio. So that color is perfectly fine to be using on that dark background, which is not quite black. Maybe it's a very, very, very dark purple. So let's check out what's going on with this button over here. So that is actually white text, okay? And let me grab this color. Is that actually the same color? Oh, it's not actually the same color. I did it backward, but that's okay. So though this purple color that's used for that button with the white text on top of it does have a contrast ratio of 5.3. So at AA, we're looking for a 4.5 for normal size text, and you only need a 3.0 for large text. And that looks like it counts as large text. Large text is bold, and let's see, it can be bold. Okay, it's hard to remember this because it's in weird measurements. Okay, large text is 14 points, which is not the same as pixels. That is 18.66 pixels. And bold, so if it's bolded, it has to be at least 18.66 pixels tall. And if it's not bold, then it has to be 18 points, which is the same as 24 pixels. But just kind of looking at that text, it does definitely look like it is over 24 pixels, although I am zoomed in. So let's double check that. And I don't think I have anything to double check the size, but it's okay. It passes 4.5. So we're good. And I think that's the same color. If you had any doubt, you would want to double check. When I hover over both of these, they get darker. And already the lighter color is sufficient contrast with white, so the darker color would definitely also have sufficient contrast with the white. Let's take a look at any other places. I'm a little bit curious about this yellow text here. So let's check that out. All right, so I'm going to grab this yellow, and that's our foreground color. And let me grab that background color that's on. It looks like yet another shade of purple. Okay, and that is an 8.24, so plenty of contrast there. All right, let me get out of that tool and we'll keep going down the page. So this all looks like sufficient contrast. You know, colors that are in the yellow and orange family are particularly tricky for laying over with white text. So let's double check this best value one and just make sure that it's got sufficient contrast. So I suspect that that's just white. It is not quite. All right, so we'll copy that as the foreground color. And then I will grab this kind of mustardy color as the background and we'll paste that in. And it is not sufficient contrast. So it is really tricky to put white text over anything in the yellow to orange family because it has to get, and you can see that we can drag this down to where it passes, and it turns brown really before it's any kind of pass. So we would want to flag an issue on this little badge here. Does not have sufficient contrast, and I'm suspicious of this pink one, so let's go ahead and check that one as well. So let's grab our foreground color there. In that case, the foreground color is actually just white. So let's grab this pink and we'll go back over here and we'll put white. Okay, and then I'll paste in my pink. Oh, it just passes. Just enough contrast. So that one is all good. But it is right on the border. Okay, so everything else, I am a little suspicious of this gray on this transparent background. So what I would want to do in this case is I would want to grab the background color that is closest to my text color, right? So if I'm over here on this part of the image, the background image is quite dark. And so there is more contrast between the text and the background here, but over here where I'm on top of the planet that's behind it, that background color is closer to this foreground color. So let's go ahead and test that one out. Let's see what we kind of get here. All right, there's my foreground color. And now we're going to grab that background color from right near the text. I'm going to try to pick the lightest area of the image, although it looks like it's mostly a very light area of that image there. And let's go test that. And just barely a pass. Okay. Well, oh, that's actually a pretty generous pass. Okay. These all look good. And of course, if you were doing, if you were really trying to check a site for every possible issue, you would want to be very thorough with all of your checks throughout the entire page. I don't want to spend my whole, the whole hour here with you just watching me double check text contrast. So I'm just kind of looking for the ones that look suspicious, which definitely here, white text on this background, I'm almost 100% sure that that is a fail. So let's double check it. Let me get, so that's not quite white. Let's go ahead and put it in here as the foreground color. And let's grab this, the lightest part of this background color right over here. Yeah, so that is only a 2.98 and it needs to be at least a 4.5, I think. I don't think that would count as large text. All right. So that gives you a good idea of how to check for the color contrast. And we did find some issues on the page that need to be addressed. And we'll move on to the next one, which is we have to be able to enlarge the page to at least 200% without causing, layout issues, overlapping text, horizontal scrolling, any kind of problems like that. So I'm already zoomed into 133%. So let me go ahead and zoom to 200 and let's take a look at the page. So I do notice this button starts to look a little bit funny. It isn't broken, but probably a designer would want to take a look at that. And of course, here we do have a problem where we have home and packages start to overlap with the name of the site. So that's something that we would definitely want to take care of and make sure that when we zoom into 200%, which is often a similar experience to what people have when they view the site on a mobile phone or when they view the site on a tablet. This is often the experience that they have. But also some people just need to be able to zoom into sites to make everything bigger so that they can see it because they have low vision. So we would want to address that. So we need to flag an issue for the header that we have some overlapping text here. And then our floating planet here did start to overlap the name of our site. So we would definitely want to flag that. And let's just scroll down the page and take a look. So our temperatures here start to go out of the boxes. So we'd want to take a look at that and make sure that we're addressing those issues and maybe making these boxes a little bit more flexible in their width because it's not a big significant overlap, and there is like a decent amount of space on the edges and between. So we could probably just introduce a little bit more flexibility there to allow those to display and stay in their boxes. All right, and here we have, so these little badges here I thought might cause a problem, but they're actually not on top of the text. So, they look a little funny, but they're not broken. So that's probably all fine. We did get some kind of weird line breaks down here. That maybe just from a design perspective we might want to take care of, but it's not a accessibility issue. But those are there. This section looks great, no issues. Same here. Resize just fine. Our FAQs seem to have worked just fine. Let's double check once we open them. Yep, those all seem to have worked just fine. Just do a quick spot check. And of course, this link is fake. It doesn't actually take me anywhere. There's only the one page here. This section came through just fine. I mean, we still have a color contrast issue, but there's no zooming issues. And this section looks all good. No horizontal scrolling, no overlapping text, and same with our footer. So really just a few areas of the page where we had some kind of issue once we zoomed in. Okay, I'm just going to hit Command 0 on my keyboard. And I think I forgot to tell you how to zoom in case you don't know. On a Windows machine, it would be Control plus the plus sign. On Mac, it would be Command plus the plus sign. And then you can use the minus sign to zoom back out. And if you just hit Command 0 on Mac or Control 0 on Windows, it'll just put it back to the original size. Okay, I'm going to close this document outline. We don't need this anymore. All right, our next WCAG Easy Check is keyboard access and visual focus. So it'll be interesting to see how this one does. So because not everybody can use a mouse, we need to make sure that all of the functionality on the page is accessible using just a keyboard. And we also have to make sure that we can tell where focus is at any given time. So this will tell you that if you are on a Mac and you haven't done accessibility testing before, you do have to go into your system preferences and update your Mac to work with keyboard only. It's kind of a weird thing. If you're on Windows, you should be all set. So basically, we're just going to come over to this page. I'm going to go ahead and refresh it just so that we're back up at the top of the page. Oh, it didn't work. Okay, here, let's do this. Okay, so now we're up at the top of the page as though we just landed here. And now all I'm going to do is hit Tab. So I can see I have a tab indicator on the home page. So you notice here's my mouse cursor. I'm going to park it right over here. I'm not going to touch the mouse. Okay. So I can see home has a highlight around it. A tab again, packages, experience FAQ contact. I would expect it now to go to book now. And I do see a highlight right around that. Book your voyage. Great. Highlighted. Learn more. Great. And now it jumped me down to book more, which is probably the next interactive element on the page. I am going to touch my mouse just for a second to scroll back up and just double check because we did skip down quite a ways. And yeah, there's nothing else in here that I would expect to get keyboard focus. So I think that's actually fine. Okay, I'm going to park my mouse back up here again. Not touching the mouse anymore. All right, so we're going to probably go to Mercury Landing book now, and then probably the Grand Mercury Tour book now, and then I would expect it to go to view all packages. Okay, so tab order seems good, and we also have a visible focus indicator so far. So this is all going fine. Okay, I suspected this might be where we ran into some issues. So I can't tell exactly where focus is. I suspect it is on that first question in the FAQs, which is it safe to travel to Mercury? I'm going to try hitting the space bar on my keyboard to see if that toggles that accordion to open. And it does. Okay. So we do have, this is keyboard operable. I can open and close by hitting the space bar on my keyboard, but I can't see that focus is here. Right. So my keyboard focus is here on this box. I'm going to move my mouse again. It is here on this box, my keyboard focus, but I can't see that it's there. So that's an issue that we would want to take care of. We would want to make sure that if we move focus to this box, that we would be able to see that that's where the focus is. Okay, so I'm going to tab again, and I'm guessing it's on how long does the journey take. We can hit the space bar to confirm. I'll tab again. It should be on the next question. Yes. And then what should I pack? Yes. And then interesting, it didn't scroll down. So we might need to look at what's happening there, but I do think it is on. Yeah. Are there physical requirements? Okay, sorry. Putting my mouse parked back up at the top. And now view all FAQs. Okay. So our accordion has an issue in that I can't see when focus is on there. It is keyboard operable. If we were doing full accessibility testing for this accordion, we would of course want to use a screen reader. I know that that's not what we're doing today. We're just doing introduction to accessibility testing, but we would want to use a screen reader to make sure that that accordion is announcing to us that it has sections of content that can be opened, expanded or closed, and that it's correctly communicating the state on whether or not each one is open or closed. So that's just something to be aware of, that when I say what we're doing today is not comprehensive accessibility testing, it's just an intro to what it might look like. Those are the kinds of things that we're leaving out. Okay, so I'm on view all FAQs and I expect it to jump down the page. Okay, so just to the next section, to the button, which is exactly what I would have expected. And then it goes to the next one. So we're all good. I'm going to hit tab one more time and it goes to the form field. So I'm just going to use my mouse for a second just to scroll down and make sure that there's nothing over here that maybe should have gotten focus first. And this one gets a little bit funny because probably I would expect this email to be a link, right, that I could click to just send an email, and it's not a link, which is maybe okay. The phone number could also be a link, which would work really well on mobile devices. If I could just click that phone number or tap that phone number, I guess I would probably tap on a mobile device. But if I could activate that phone number on a mobile device and just immediately call, because I'm so anxious to book my trip to Mercury, that would be ideal. So not an accessibility issue because they're not actually links, but I think a usability thing that we might want to look at is should the phone number and the email address be links. All right, I'm going to park my mouse back up here at the top again, and I can see that the first name field has focus. It did get a purple focus ring around it. Email address, interest. So I'm just going to double check and make sure that with my keyboard, I can pick a different interest on here. So that all worked fine. And of course, this is a pretend form. It's not actually hooked up to anything. So I wouldn't expect anything to actually happen if I submit the form. But if it were a real form, we would, of course, want to test and see what happened when we submitted the form and make sure that everything was accessible, that if there were error messages or anything like that, that they were all programmed correctly. Okay, so I hit tab again, and now I'm down into the footer links, and I'm just going to quickly tab through those, make sure that they all get a focus ring, and of course, all of those links. All of these links are just to different sections on the page. And then here are the credits for where all of the images came from. And then we have our social media links, which are all pretend links because this, Mercury Voyages company doesn't exist. I'm sorry if you wanted to go to Mercury. Okay, and then tab into this field, and I do have a blinking cursor in the email field, but it didn't get any kind of focus indicator on it. So I would probably flag that and make sure that, just like I'm going to touch my mouse again, just like the field here got this kind of purple border around each of the fields when they had focus, I would expect this field to do the same thing. So I would definitely flag that. Okay, I'm going to park my mouse again and hit tab. The submit button for that form does actually have a focus indicator on it. So just for some reason, that one field got left out. I don't know. And if I tab again, I'm back up at the top of the page. So we went through the entire page. So just doing this kind of quick cursory keyboard check, we didn't find any issues with functionality, which, to be fair, there's not a whole lot of functionality on this page. Just those accordions, but we did find a few places where there was a focus indicator missing. So we would want to flag those as issues and get those fixed. All right, so now our forms, labels, and errors, which we may not be able to do a very extensive test on because we have a fake form that's not actually hooked up to anything, but we'll do our best. So the first thing that we would want to check for is that all form controls are keyboard accessible, which we did in the previous test. We would want to make sure that the labels are correctly associated with the form fields. So let's jump over there and do that now. So we have two forms, I think. Let me just double check. But I think that's it. Right? Okay, scroll back down. Yeah, so we just have two forms. We have this contact form, and then we have the subscribe form. And the contact form is superficially looking pretty good because we do actually have labels for each form field. It didn't just use placeholders, right? So we have an always visible label for the form field. And the question would be, are those correctly associated with the form fields? And a quick and easy way to tell is if you click on the label itself, the form field should get focused. So you see that when I click on your name, this field automatically highlighted. So this label is correctly associated with this form field. So I'm just going to check the others. Email address, yes. Interest, yes. Message, yes. So this form field looks good. Now, this one in the footer, we already know because we saw this when we were testing the headings that this subscribe to newsletter is not a label, it is a heading. And it is not associated with this form. And we are using a placeholder in here that says your email, that of course, as soon as I type a character, that's going to go away. And I no longer know what the label for this field was. So that's something that we would probably want to flag and get that fixed. Make sure that there's an always visible label available for this form field. And then also this one, for some reason, has no focus indicator on it. Okay, and then there's no required fields or any kind of instructions, right? It's a pretty basic form. There's nothing here that's super complicated or hard to figure out. So there's no additional instructions and no errors. I'm pretty sure. Let's just try to see what happens when we submit. I think it's just going to refresh the page. Yeah, so there's no kind of form validation or anything on this form, and it doesn't actually send anywhere. So we can't do anything kind of more extensive than that. All right, so let's move on to our next test, which is looking for moving, flashing, or blinking content. And so I flagged this already at the beginning of the stream. We do have some animation happening here. It is subtle, but it is ongoing, and there's no way to pause it. So this button up here is kind of pulsing, I guess, right? This big picture of Mercury is kind of floating up and down along with this next launch, which is, not great. It's already making me feel kind of dizzy. It's kind of a big image. And then this button here is also kind of pulsing. I think that's probably all of it for the page, but let's just scroll down and double check. So what we would want to do for that case, like where we have several things that are animating in the header, we would want to make sure that if the user has their preferred reduced motion setting in their browser set to true, that would stop. I highly doubt that that's how that got coded by AI, but that would be something we would want to check. We would want to have some kind of way to stop that animation. And that is kind of our second choice, right? Our first choice would be to just not have it there at all, to just not inflict that upon people who are looking at our site, and to really not use kind of unnecessary animation like that would be the best option. But if for some reason that can't happen, right? Then we want to provide a way for people to stop that. If they come to the site and it is bothering them, we want to provide a way for them to stop that from happening. And that there's nothing here on the page that would allow me to do that. So that would be our second best option. Okay, let's kind of take a look. Was there anything else on this page that was moving? Oh, this button here is also kind of pulsing. So we would want to do the same thing there, maybe not make it pulse or have a way to stop any kind of motion happening on the page. But we don't have automatically playing video. We don't have automatically playing audio. We don't have anything flashing at us that might trigger somebody who has a seizure disorder. So there is that animation there. We would definitely want to take care of it and make sure that there is a way to disable that, or better yet, just turn it off for everybody altogether. All right, so multimedia. We don't have any multimedia on this page. There's no video, there's no audio. So there's nothing for us to check on this particular page for this test. And then our last check is going to just be a basic structure test. And one of the nicest ways, or like fastest and easiest ways to do this, is to use the web developer toolbar. It has an option under CSS to just disable all styles. And if you click it, you get just a raw HTML file with no styles applied to it at all, which gives you a nice opportunity to kind of take a look at how the page is coded and how the page is put together. And to make sure that it makes sense, even like this, right? Even without any kind of styles applied, does it make sense? One thing I noticed right away is that our Book Now button here is a button, even though I'm pretty sure that's a link. Right? That ideally you would click that and it would take you to a new web page where you would actually book. And so that should be a link and not a button. The open main menu, I didn't remember seeing that. So when we go back to the page, we might just double check a mobile view to see if there is a toggle for the menu. And then we would want to make sure that that worked with the keyboard only. So we'll go back to the page and check that. And then again, we have Book Your Voyage, which again is similar to this Book Now button. I would expect that to be a link that would take me to a new page, but it looks like it is programmed as a button, which wouldn't be correct. And then Learn More, I would also expect to be a link that would take me off to another page with more information about these trips to Mercury, but it looks like it's programmed as a button. So we would want to get that fixed. And then we have our giant picture. So this is looking a little funny. So we definitely would want to take a look at how that is getting marked up and make sure that that is more legible, because that doesn't make any sense, right? Because it is, the next launch is in 14 days, 22 hours, and 3 minutes. This is not an active countdown timer. I did notice that there's no JavaScript counting down on that. If there was, that would be another thing that we would flag under that pause, stop, hide, right, where we have the motion. We would want to have a way to stop that from counting. But we can see that how it gets read is 14, 22, 2 days, hours, minutes, which doesn't make any sense. So we have a real issue here with the content order that we would want to address in that little box. It looks like a little countdown box. All right, then 88 Earth days in a Mercury year seems fine. 430 degrees Celsius daytime temperature, minus 180 degrees nighttime temperature, and then our gravity, which all seems fine. Travel packages, choose from our packages. And then we have popular, this package with a description. We do have Book Now is a button. And I know it looks like a button on the screen, but I would expect that to be a link that would take me off to somewhere that I could book. So I'd expect that to actually be a link. We have our next package, Best Value, Mercury Landing. This all seems fine. We do have something funny happening here with the price, where it seems like maybe this is the original price and this is the sale price. And maybe those aren't quite marked up correctly. I think I might have missed that on this one. Yeah, so there's a similar thing happening on this one. So that's not very clear at all. I think CSS is just being used to show one of them as like crossed out or something. So we would want to have that in the markup so that we had that meaning, the semantic meaning of the price being crossed out. So that's something that would need to be touched up. And then this one, no deal on this one. You got to have $999,000 to go on this trip. So this all looks good, except for, we have buttons here when we probably should have links. And we go down through. This all seems fine. I can understand it. Okay, here's our accordion. So the questions are buttons, which that's a pretty decent way to code an accordion, actually. And like I said, we would want to test that with a screen reader to make sure that it was reading out the correct states and things like that, so that we can make sure that it made sense how that was working with a screen reader. But it is keyboard accessible and seemed to work just fine. So those all being buttons is fine. View all FAQs, I would expect to be a link that would take me off to another page that maybe had a more extensive list of questions, and I would expect it to be a button. And then here again, I've got 2 buttons when I would expect probably 2 links. All right, we got a pretty basic form with a drop-down menu and a button to submit it. That all seems good. We have a footer with just some links. We have, it looks like our submit button for our form is missing kind of accessible text. There's just nothing in there at all. It's just a tiny little empty button. So that's definitely something we would want to take a look at. So these are the kind of little issues that you can notice when you remove the CSS from the site. And now you are, now you just have the HTML. You just have what kind of structure and what kind of semantics got set up in the HTML itself. And now we can recognize that there's some problems here. I completely missed that this submit button didn't have text on it. And now that I think about it, and if we refresh the page and go back to look at it, it didn't have text. It just had a little arrow. So we would want to make sure that we flag that and make sure that there's some text there so that people understand what that button does. And if we go back up to the top, so here was our little problematic section that read, that is going to read out to a system technology as next launch in 14/22/08 days, hours, minutes, which isn't going to make any sense. So that is something that we would want to get addressed. And then I wanted to look at the pricing. Yeah. So you can see that our deals here, when we looked at just the HTML, we just saw this price, and then this save money. But when we look at it styled with CSS, we can see that the intention is that this is crossed out. So that should actually be wrapped in a del tag to mark that that is deleted, it is gone, it is not on the page, that is content that we are showing as no longer relevant, right? Like no longer part of the document. So we would want to touch that up as well. And then of course we have that button in the footer that is missing any kind of text. It just has an image on it. All right, well, that was our last, the basic structure text, or the basic structure check rather, is the last of the WCAG Easy Checks. We are at the end of the document. Next step, share your findings with someone who can fix the accessibility barriers. Yes, absolutely. That would be the next thing for you to do if you're testing a web page. Share that with somebody who can get it fixed, or maybe that's you. Maybe you're the one who needs to go in and fix your website and get everything squared away. This is the closest I've ever come to doing this in exactly 1 hour. So here we are. I've been streaming for 59 minutes and 20 seconds. So almost exactly 1 hour. So thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to wrap up because we finished all of the WCAG Easy Checks. 2 weeks from today, we'll do another live stream. I'm not sure exactly what the topic will be. Maybe we could do screen reader testing again. I think it's been a little while since we've done a screen reader demo. So maybe we'll test this Discover Mercury page. We'll keep testing it out with the screen reader and continue the testing and see what other issues we can find on here. So I won't fix any issues on this page. During the next 2 weeks, I will leave it as is. So if you want to jump on to discovermercury.site and step through the WCAG Easy Checks or run any other kind of accessibility tests on this page, it is online and free for you to do that and check it out. Don't get too excited. It's only a pretend site. You can't actually go on a trip to the planet Mercury. Maybe someday, I don't know. Doesn't seem like a very good idea though. If you just look at these temperatures, they don't seem very hospitable. But anyway, I will see you again in 2 weeks from today. Thanks for joining me today. And I hope that you learned a little bit of something about accessibility testing. See you next time.